America, the classic muscle car picture is easy to recognize. 2 doors, a long hood, a big V8, and a badge like GTO, Charger or Mustang. Australia took that idea and did something much stranger with it. One of its fiercest performance cars looked like a family sedan. Another used 6 cylinders to embarrass V8s. All of them were shaped by a race across a mountain that turned ordinary showrooms into the front line of an engineering war. That was June 25th, 1972. Within a week, the war was effectively over. 8 years before that political storm, Pontiac had dropped a 389 cubic inch V8 into the mid-sized Tempest and called the result GTO. General Motors marks the 1964 GTO as the birth of the muscle car, and the formula spread quickly through Detroit. Take a practical platform, add an engine that seemed one size too large, sharpen the image, and sell speed to ordinary drivers. Australia did not simply copy that formula. Its roads, factories, taxes, racing rules and buyers pushed the same basic ingredients in another direction. The foundation had been laid in 1948, when the first mass-produced Holden rolled out as a family car built for Australian conditions. It was sturdy, affordable, and important far beyond the dealership. Local manufacturing meant jobs, technical skill, national pride, and less dependence on imported cars. By 1958, Holden controlled more than 40% of the Australian market. Ford answered with the Falcon, Chrysler with the Valiant, and the country soon had its own version of Detroit's Big Three. There was one major catch. Australia was a much smaller market. Ford, Holden, and Chrysler were fighting for buyers while supporting separate local engineering and manufacturing programs. A fast model could not exist as a casual side project. It had to sell cars, build a brand, and justify itself. Bathurst gave it that justification. Mount Panorama did not look like a laboratory. It looked like a public road thrown over a mountain, with steep climbs, blind crests, punishing descents, and a long straight that rewarded horsepower before the next braking zone punished everything else. Under the series production rules of the era, the cars on the track were tied closely to cars offered to the public. If a manufacturer wanted a better race car, it had to create a road-going version first. That connection changed the showroom. Racing was no longer just advertising placed beside the product. The race helped define the product. Holden made the first decisive move with the HK Monaro. Launched in 1968, the low 2-door coupe looked more like Australia's answer to an American personal performance car than a traditional family Holden. The GTS 327 carried Chevrolet V8 power, but the importance of the Monaro was not just the engine. It showed that Holden could wrap international hardware in a distinct Australian body, tune it for local competition, and sell the result as something with its own identity. That same year, an HK Monaro delivered Holden's first victory in the Bathurst 500. The win connected the new coupe to the mountain immediately. A buyer did not have to imagine whether the shape and mechanical package belonged in competition. The proof had just completed 500 miles. That was only round one. Ford's Falcon was still fundamentally a family sedan, which made its transformation even more dramatic. The GT program turned the Falcon into a performance flagship, and the letters HO stood for handling option. That name matters. Ford was not admitting to a simple engine swap. The car had to survive braking, cornering, heat, tires, and a race that could expose every weak component. Ford could have stopped with the earlier GT-HO versions. It didn't. For 1971, the XY Falcon GT-HO Phase 3 arrived with the 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8 and the hardware required to use it. From a distance, it remained a 4-door Falcon. Look closer and the wider stance, spoilers, stripes and shaker scoop told a different story. This was a homologation car wearing the outline of everyday transport. At Bathurst in 1971, the Phase 3 did not merely win. Falcons filled the first 7 places in qualifying, then finished first, second and third in the race. Alan Moffat's victory made the logic brutally clear. Build the right road car, make it eligible for the mountain, and the mountain could sell the car back to the public as a legend. The Phase 3 was claimed as the fastest four-door production car in the world. Arguments about period speed tests still keep enthusiasts busy, but the uncontested part is more interesting. Australia had produced a family-sized sedan specifically sharpened by one of the hardest production car races on Earth. That is a grocery getter silhouette with a factory race program hiding underneath it. Holden and Ford were turning V8 power into national rivalry. Chrysler Australia chose a more surprising route. The Valiant had entered the market in the early 1960s as an American compact adapted for local production. By the end of that decade, Chrysler had developed deep Australian engineering and manufacturing capability, but it remained the smallest of the three major players. Matching Ford and Holden with the same recipe would not be enough. Chrysler needed something unmistakable. The V8 Valiant Charger supplied the shape. Launched in 1971, it shortened the Valiant package into a muscular fastback coupe with a wide rear shoulder and a compact planted stance. As buyers, this was a distinct Australian car. Then came the E49. Most American enthusiasts never hear about this part because the engine bay breaks the expected rule. The E49 did not rely on a giant V8. Its weapon was a 265 cubic inch Hemi 6 fed by three twin-barrel Weber carburetors. The package produced 302 brake horsepower, 1 seconds. That output from a naturally aspirated production 6 in 1972 was not a consolation prize. It was the main event. The 6 was lighter over the nose than a large V8, and Chrysler developed the engine, gearing, fuel capacity, and chassis around long-distance competition. Clever, slightly mad, and very Australian. The Monaro, Falcon, and Charger therefore represented three different answers to the same pressure. Holden created a locally styled coupe around proven V8 power. Ford converted the family sedan into a Bathurst weapon. Chrysler made a uniquely Australian coupe and extracted extraordinary performance from an inline-six. If you enjoy classic car stories where the engineering matters as much as the badge, subscribe. There are many more forgotten branches of familiar American family trees to uncover. While Chrysler was finding speed with 6 cylinders, Ford and Holden were preparing their next escalation. The race rules still rewarded road-going homologation specials, so the logical move was to build faster versions for the public. On paper, the cycle could continue indefinitely. Better showroom car, better race car, bigger victory, stronger sales. The same rule that created Australia's greatest muscle cars was about to destroy the system that produced them. On June 25, 1972, Sydney's Sun Herald ran a report about coming 160-mile-per-hour supercars. The headline landed in a country already arguing about road safety and rising traffic deaths. Politicians objected to manufacturers selling extremely fast cars to ordinary motorists simply because production examples were needed for racing. The reaction was immediate. The proposed Ford Falcon GTO Phase 4 became the symbol of the controversy, while Holden's V8 Torana plans and Chrysler's future performance work were pulled into the same storm. Officials warned about government purchasing and registration. The racing authority announced that series production racing would be discontinued. Within roughly a week, the manufacturers had backed away from the programs. This decision seemed small in the wider world of 1972. It wasn't. The incentive that had forced manufacturers to put race-bred hardware into public showrooms was gone. Ford no longer needed to sell a Phase 4 to race a modified Falcon. Holden no longer needed the same kind of road-going special to develop a competitive Torana. The direct mechanical bridge between dealer inventory and the Bathurst grid had been broken. The final race of the old order delivered one more reversal. In the wet 1972 Bathurst 500, Peter Brock won in a 6-cylinder Holden Torana GTR XU1, defeating the larger Falcons. The result proved that Australia's performance story was never only about displacement. Weight, balance, braking, reliability, and the driver still had the final vote. For 1973, Group C rules allowed more modification of production-based race cars. Bathurst also expanded from 500 miles to 1,000 kilometers. The racing remained spectacular, and the Ford vs Holden rivalry grew into a national institution. But the road cars and race cars could now develop on more separate paths. The original arms race had lasted only a few years, yet it defined Australian muscle for decades. These cars were not lesser copies of Detroit products. They were the result of American corporate roots colliding with Australian conditions, a tiny market, local designers, local engineers, and a mountain circuit that demanded far more than a quarter-mile run. The evidence is in the solutions. The Monaro carried a familiar General Motors V8, but made the coupe Australian. The Falcon took a name Americans associated with modest transportation and turned it into one of the world's most intimidating four-door performance cars. The Charger borrowed a Chrysler badge, then built its legend around an engine configuration Detroit muscle buyers might have dismissed, and the influence eventually traveled back across the Pacific. In 2004, Pontiac revived the GTO in the United States. The car underneath was a Holden Monaro, assembled by General Motors' Australian arm. 40 years after the original Pontiac helped establish the American muscle car formula, an Australian coupe brought the badge back to American showrooms. The styling was restrained and the marketing never fully captured the car's story. But the engineering connection completed a remarkable circle. America had sent platforms, engines, brands, and corporate expertise south. Australia had spent decades adapting them, racing them, and developing its own performance culture. Then America imported the result. The real question is not whether Australian muscle was better than American muscle. It is why the same ingredients produced such different cars. Detroit had broad highways, a vast market, drag strips, and an annual model race. Australia had limited volume, long distances, local content pressure, and Mount Panorama. Detroit made the muscle car a cultural phenomenon. Australia made it carry a family, climb a mountain, stop at the bottom, and be ready to do it again. That is why the best Australian classics feel familiar for about 3 seconds. Then you notice the four doors, the right-hand steering wheel, the Hemi 6, or the Bathurst badge, and the family resemblance disappears. These cars came from American bloodlines, but the mountain gave them their character.